First of all, good afternoon, everybody. And before going on, let's recite the linear supplication.
Sa
So we'll continue a little from where we left off this morning. So beginning the actual text, the first thing that Lord Gampopa tells us is that the person who is going to practice this needs to really want the achievement of both liberation and of omniscient Buddhahood. This is the qualification that makes your present existence a fit receptacle or support for the teachings. It is the same thing that Lord Gampopa spoke of in the jewel ornament when he said that the qualified practitioner has the human body endowed with the two things, freedom and resources, and the mind endowed with three things, the three types of faith. Such a person will earnestly desire liberation and omniscience. The term liberation is more general and can refer to the liberation, mere liberation from samsara of either a Shravaka or Pacceka Buddha. The term omniscience is specific and refers to the omniscient full awakening of a Buddha. The state of mere liberation is achieved through the eradication of the emotional obscuration, and that is sufficient to free one from samsara. However, to achieve the state of omniscient Buddhahood, one must eradicate also the cognitive obscuration and the habitual obscuration, even in its most subtle form. So, somebody who seeks liberation and omniscient Buddhahood must necessarily recognize that samsara is suffering, and therefore have the sincere wish to relinquish it, to transcend it. And such a person is fit to implement what is taught in this precious garland of the Supreme Path. So therefore, it is because using what is taught in this precious garland of the Supreme Path that one can achieve one's aims of liberation and omniscient Buddhahood that one practices it. The text is divided into several topics, arranged as numerically ordered lists of things in several categories. The first topic is the recollection of the 10 tragedies. Now, by tragedy here, what Lord Gampopa means is a tragic loss or tragic waste, such as when one loses something extremely precious and it goes to waste needlessly, or when one loses a friend who is very dear to one needlessly. So these are tragedies because they are things, important, precious things going needlessly to waste.
The
literal meaning of the word pang is to cling to something, or something to be very, very dear to one. So it means the loss of something very precious. The first of the 10 tragic losses or tragedies is, it is tragic when this pure human body, so difficult to acquire, goes to waste in the pursuit, or is wasted in the pursuit of unvirtuous negative deeds. What this means is that, first of all, this precious human body, as is taught extensively in many texts, is very, very rare, is very, very hard to acquire. And therefore, to waste it is tragic. Traditionally, the difficulty of acquiring this precious human existence, its rarity of acquisition, is demonstrated in 3 ways. By explaining the cause of its acquisition and the rarity of that cause, by discussing the statistics or proportion of how many beings have it and how many beings don't, and through the use of analogies. The first of these is as follows. The only possible karmic cause of being born with a precious human existence is to maintain some kind of ethical or moral code of conduct. In addition to that, in order to be reborn with a precious human existence, you must engage in positive, not only abstention from wrongdoing, but positive acts of virtue as well. How many beings actually do this? How many of us actually behave well as opposed to poorly? To be born with a human body that is also free in the sense of able to gain access to Dharma and so forth, is even rarer. And among those that even have this, how many beings actually have interest in Dharma? How many are interested enough to listen to teachings, spiritual teachings. And of those who listen to such things, who go to empowerments, take refuge in all of that, how many actually keep the vows that they take? How many actually keep the Samaya vows incurred during empowerment? Or even the vows of the refuge and so on all the way up? If we look at our own experience of how difficult to keep these vows it really is, how many infractions are constantly occurring to our vows of refuge and Samaya and so forth, we can appreciate how rare it is for beings to actually pursue flawless ethical conduct. As Milarepa wrote or said, it may not be that rare for people to have some degree of freedom and resources, but it's extremely rare for those who do to behave well. As rare as it may be for human beings to behave well, we consider those who use their lives meaningfully to have what we would call a pure human existence, whereas those who use the capacities of a human being to harm others, to engage in wrongdoing, we call merely human because they are technically human, but they are not using their opportunity as a human being in a pure way. So, what Gampopa is saying in this point is that given that we have the freedom and resources that we possess in this life, which freedoms and resources give us the actual ability not only to proceed toward our own liberation, but to do others a tremendous amount of good. If we don't use our life for this purpose, if we devote our powerful human bodies, speech, and minds to wrongdoing, to harming others, that is a tragic waste. The second tragedy is, it is tragic when someone dies with a body that has never been blessed by Dharma. Why is that tragic? Well, this brings us to the second way that the rarity of human existence is presented, and this is the statistics or proportion. It is said that the difference proportionally between the number of hell beings and the number of pretas is the same as the difference between the number of stars you can see on a clear night and the number of stars you can see on a bright sunny day. It's said that the difference in proportion between the number of pretas and the number of animals is the same. and that between animals and those in higher realms in general the same, and that between those in higher realms and those with precious human bodies the same. Given how rare it is to possess what we possess, if we die with ordinary bodies that have never experienced Dharma, that is tragic. It's a waste if this pure human body dies ordinary and untrained. We want to practice to the extent that when we die, we will have no regrets. To the extent that when we die, we will have such assurance based on assiduous practice that we will enter death joyously. But have we done that? Have we actually even begun to move in that direction? Because if we have not, if we don't gain any confidence through assiduous practice, then when we die, we will be in pretty well exactly the same state as someone who had not practiced at all. We will die ordinary, deluded, and terrified. Will be someone who was born ordinary and died ordinary. Listen, before we get too grim, we better move on. The third one is this ephemerally brief life in this age of degeneracy, to waste it in meaningless busyness is a tragic shame, or is a tragedy. When we talk about degeneracy, we talk about a time in the broad terms of human history where things are on a downswing, things are falling apart. And generally it's said that there are 5 things that are falling apart. Beings. The beings in a tse nyingma seki in a chidan se ganza nyingma dang semje nyingma chibada ware do. There's one that's beings and there's one that's individuals. So probably one of them refers to lifespan or quality of life. But anyway, so you can say the mental state of beings is falling apart or degenerate. Our emotions have become coarser. Our outlook or views are more twisted. Semje nyingma, nyomo nyingma, tawa nyingma, ganza nyingma, and our lives pass quickly, and people, it says literally people or individuals have become degenerate. The whole period of human history of which we are aware is actually a period of afflicted decadence. The human life has, in recorded history, has always been very short, afflicted by a great deal of illness. People are emotionally very turbulent, and so forth.
나대 가상게 갑라 메강가 체랭보 되네지 몽주 침보 내나자 매바 다든데 용교래.
There are other times and places where human beings live far longer, have far fewer sickness, and are emotionally far more stable than and very, very happy.
다된데 제 이미지데 미세 윤통통 유잠들라 내가 말한저 남준 제거에 가르쳐서나 담비추 줘버레스 담비추 맞어봐지네 내가 지금 자와들라 다 마만에 앵데라 나다 앵소나 내가 지금 인문에 받쳐줘요래 된데 남준 말한저 내가 지 최단 몇번 빌려가 제대 제가 담보요래 내가 들라 잉슈도 갑슬라 되는지 뒤서디야 정부이나 통통 소리를 되는지 최지연도 냠는도 버져도 검자도 나야 니고여도 보다 녀배도 보다 뒤서 통통은 나랑 부차여도 보다 근데 용교로 전망들라요.
The danger of which Gampopa is warning us here is that since we have such short lifespans, if we engage ourselves in the wrong activities, we can vanish. The lifespan can vanish in the twinkling of an eye. If you think about it, when we are engaged in something mundane and pointless, we find our minds very, very clear, very effective. We feel filled with energy. And no matter how long we have to work at it, the time seems to pass very quickly. But when we are attempting to engage in spiritual practice, often the opposite happens. Our minds become torpid, and we feel ourselves starting to go to sleep. Even a short period of meditation drags on and seems to take hours and hours and hours. So there is the danger that by choosing what seems more natural and easy for us, our lives can be spent in idle pursuits.
다 최찬이 드라마토바 대연조 마도 지든 자와제 대 다르도 된라 삼로당나 네 펜도 시라메 된다야 자침보시라 드라마도 다 되네가라 되네 메세데 조소나 되네 톨라레스 방보레스.
And if you spend your whole life going back and forth and wandering up and down and doing this and that, and never come to actually assiduously practicing Dharma, then that is a tragic waste.
다시버데 랑심 추구 랑신 쩌면디 출바 코르비담도 징도팡스.
The fourth one in this list, the fourth tragedy is, it is tragic to allow one's mind, which is the Dharmakaya in nature, beyond all embellishment, to sink into the swamp of delusion.
다자제 진별 갑슬라 뭐 동바 랑신 사와스니다 심진내로들라 시용교래 네 간다 네 랑신 남다스나레 교대월셔빈 임보스나레 디 내가 심진 담제줄라 요래 심진 담제라 잡되요래 이나 여버디 마리베 왕기 하마고 모마셰 드네제 장regla 다도 출 라나라 열도 좀 열도 출네 드네제 출배왕도 쇼도요래.
As is taught in Mahamudra, what our minds really are is the unity of emptiness and cognitive lucidity. The nature of our minds is emptiness, and the defining attribute of our minds is cognitive lucidity. Therefore, our minds in and of themselves are utterly pure, are what we call Sugatagarbha, or Buddha nature. And this is true of each and every being without exception. However, we fail to see what our minds really are. And therefore we mistake them as what they are not. We mistake self-awareness as a self, and we mistake the content of our experience as other, as objects, foreign objects. And that is the delusion in which we are sunk.
다 공도 쉬버데서 류라 저 송교래 나다데 저 샘다마 또 셰용교래.
Now, the first 3 points in this section were mostly about the body, about the proper use of the human body. This is about the mind.
다 단나갑슬라 마랑이 샘데베 자침보레 샘데 베제레 고실라 땅 냠내야 고시 제나니 최제고레 나 라신제 산제레 고숨나는 최제고 드메 있는 제버도 바바지레스 다들 셰용교래.
So what he's saying here is we need to appreciate our mind. Our minds are actually extremely precious. Our minds are Buddha nature. Our minds are the Dharmachakra.
되는 한숨 추구에 뭐 마시네 투네 하나 고려담도 칭 고려내서라던 동안나바 나 저제 양낭의 선수도 제 나다 밀레제장 는 한숨 추지고 뭐 마셔발 때네 되는 지대니 자와 총 선남도 연종이 자와 코나 제네되는 민제도 조로요래.
So this is really a tragedy in which we are immersed, because it is through not recognizing that our minds are Dharmakaya that we have become deluded and sunk into the swamp of samsaric delusion. It is because we don't recognize our minds to be what they are that we suffer. And even when we're born as human beings, with the tremendous capacity that for spiritual development that human beings have, we tend, because we don't recognize our true nature, we tend to waste our lives in attempting to compete with our enemies, placate our friends, and so forth.
하나 대갑슬라 추구데 너불라 빼샤 되네 크로와데 담라 빼샤 다 너부데 네 담제나라 홍송나 담진앙라 되네 주주송나 조바차송나 다 지당 너부 그럼 조바차요 말때 담지고다 베저 땅 마셔바나 땅 마토바나 너부여바데 펜도 매바다오지 잘 그래.
Implicit in this line is the analogy comparing the mind, well, especially the Dharmakaya, the mind's nature, to a precious jewel, and samsara to a swamp. If a jewel somehow falls into a swamp or into quicksand, the jewel itself may be unaffected by that, but our access to the jewel is very much affected. The jewel is lost to all intents and purposes. Then the fifth point here is, it is tragic to be separated before awakening from the Holy Guru who guides us on the path. Why do we need gurus? Because the path to liberation and awakening is unfamiliar to us. Whenever we visit a country to which we have not previously been, we either seek the company of a guide, or at least we use some kind of map. In the same way, since we have not yet trod the path to liberation and awakening, we need the guidance of somebody who has. And that is the function of what's called a holy guru, somebody who has actually trod that path and can therefore lead us along it.
다 라마라양 다 라마 뭐요래 라마 탑자 라마 제벌 담바바 다 라마 담바던데 요래 내가 랑기 되나 저도 라마 녀거데 라마 대양 라마 제벌도 봐봐 라마 담바 라마 야고 된 라마 잠닝지당 덴바 라마 코라야 대바 무교전 다 라마 냠렌전 라마 케바 숨바 야고시도 보래.
Now, there are gurus and gurus. There are all kinds of lamas. Everything from terrible to fantastic, and everything in between. The reason why Gampopa says the holy guru is not just any guru will do. The guru has to themselves have faith and devotion, practice intensively, be noble in their conduct, and be learned.
다 라마 담바야 보시 톰네 마란데 종네 담마데서 슈 냠스 랭거레 대단 마제버 라마다 자 자네 네 장주 마도 버도 라마다 마저버 땡고거데 네지 담마서 슈 냠는 제고로만나 네 참참양 라마게 제바 다메르데 네 대바 로바당 대바 마제바당 다 되네 종나 야고요 말에.
Because we continue to need guidance throughout the path, it is important not to become separated from the guru or gurus on whom one relies. The danger of separation principally arises from the danger of one losing one's faith. If one becomes displeased by or disapproving of something the guru says or does and loses faith in him or her, then that is what brings separation.
나진도 제 라마라 담마데 슈 한조조데 가랑아 거에 냠렌디 야고 제고를 만난 적이 드네 라마 냠도 제멘데 드네 라마 나 윤데 마동 전통 드네 초보자 드네 가가 저거도나 갈라카보레 산이 좀는데 냠도라야 kelong lebe karma lo ni stenga te nyam de yore te inaya tama koran hidas ki go chong batende yolorju yore.
Now, when it says it's important never to be separated from the guru, this doesn't mean that it is either necessary or sufficient to constantly be in the guru's company. The point of relying on a guru is to receive their practical instructions. Then you have to practice these instructions. That is their purpose. But if you don't do that, if you simply remain in the company of the guru and do not practice, then over time you will project your own negativity onto the guru. As they become more and more familiar to you and you take them for granted, you will start to see fewer and fewer qualities and finally none at all. More and more faults, and finally only faults in the guru. And this was true even in the case of the Buddha, who had an attendant called Lucky Star, a somewhat ironic name, who attended the Buddha for 25 years straight, and at the end abandoned him, saying, you and I are the same, except for that 6-foot halo of yours. In fact, I know your teachings better than you do, and was reborn as a preta.
단딘데 나갑슬라데 라마데 담바 장주 마도보도 마절보 검라데 셈지 담보 담아슈 는 셈지 땡도라 안 제불소도 잘매도 솔와담네 공구요래.
So in order to prevent this kind of tragedy, having received instructions from the guru, we need to make the aspiration in our minds never to be separated from him or her until awakening.
변나가 한서 가지고 공부하듯 줄라야 야 잘요나양 밀라기 다타마 마베 담간 암서르절라 코난 잡고난 조금 잡쇼 두단들라 라마살아용 되는 독설제 내가 감보파 잡고나양 밀라kumnala 다 밀라 고세텐데 버도 쇼요 말에 담아 차장 슈 되네 코랑 울라변데 냠네 낭 되네 제거래 안 라마치오소도 되네 공교래 나랑서 되나 저거도 내야 버려.
So this may not entail actually living the entirety of your life in the company of the Guru. If we look at the lives of our Kaju forebears, in the case of Jetsun Milarepa, having received complete instructions from Lord Marpa, for some time he practiced in Marpa's vicinity, periodically consulting him for further guidance, but thereafter Milarepa went off and lived in isolation. In the case of Lord Gampopa, having received Milarepa's instructions, he eventually left and practiced on his own. But they both always kept their guru over the top of their heads in devotion.
다 두 번째 탈비 주생 또 담직 데스 유몽 방매 개왕기 식도 방스
The Drukpa Ere.
나래
The sixth one is, it is tragic when the boat or ship that leads to liberation, one's vows and samaya, is destroyed by the ferocious waves of kleshas and carelessness.
탈라마라 때네 탈바토고레 딘데 크로와데 동아리 자주 잡으시레 나란소 크로와라 네바 딜라 네 동아 남바나 소바 한 자주 잡으시 레라 한 자주 나라 다 갈고나 데네 징하나서 제견에 게도 말해라 데네 가려 인징미지 두승 춘중게 자주 게도 말라 두승 첨복고래 다 두승 뒤에나 한 자주 바로 사감사라 랩트 난데 빼야 보지부 용교래
The analogy here is founded on the previous analogy of samsara as an ocean. So, since we wish to cross this ocean and reach the other shore of liberation, we rely upon a guru. But in order to actually cross this ocean, we need a substantial vessel. You cannot cross a vast and turbulent ocean in a tiny little rowboat. You need quite a large ship to be assured of a safe crossing. So, it is actually this ship that we build or acquire that will bring us across the ocean of samsara. And therefore, the ship is very important. The ship is actually made up of the vows that we affirm, that we take. The vows of pratimoksha, the bodhisattva vow, and the vows of mantra. In short, our personal ship is built of our vows. And in order to keep that ship from leaking and sinking, we need to keep our vows. So the vows that we take and the samaya or promises that we make when we receive empowerment, these are what will get us across the ocean of samsara. These are the ship in which we must travel.
다 주생나라 기부 전에 만들어 전에 다나 대가가 다르비 주생 돈바 담직 데스 되는 영웅 방매 영웅 기식도 방스 되는 말아서 돈바데단 담직도 되는 셈 방매 왕기 되는 도자자단 쇼좀 보제 되는 대조원 상황도 땅 되는 돈바단 아 돈바야 냠초 담제야 다지 냠차 송마다 되는 중보에나 되는 말아서 주생이 식샤고 나생래.
Being inside this ship is surely much more pleasant than drowning in the ocean from which it delivers us. But there is still the danger of a carelessness, that carelessly we will allow our emotions, such as attachment and hatred, to destroy this ship on which we depend.
다 두생디 수식이로서 랑랑이 식도교래 근데 랑 식선나 랑 자주나 롱저에당 안 자주나라 다 지고 전부도서 연교래 근데 두생 가르치 시긴 가르치는 식교로서나 대랑 세당 맞아 다도 깨네 sem 맞지보다 맞다더니 식도교래 다 선대 방에 맞아 도교래 근데 나강 도도기 바여 버제네 전세 바여 때네 근데 돈 버데 소에 개전부래 쓴다
No one other than you can sink your ship. And if that ship sinks, you will be the one who will drown in the ocean. So it is important for your own sake to be careful, to be attentive, and to take responsibility for your own emotions, so that you don't sink the ship. So Lord Gampopa is saying this to recommend mindfulness, alertness, and circumspection.
다 주버 듬버데 라미팅지 라라 예비 도버데 두제 창증기 셉도 또르도방
뒤에 라메드린 에레 Oh, del la me chen, la me drin yin sa re ko. La me drin jo na ni ba.
가서 라미 겐지 사이트에도 다
Che pa mo drin de je sang sing ge set tong ba. Tor de pang re tong ma ra ba. Tor de pang re tor re de la tong de la ignore mo bo do. The seventh one is, it is tragic to cast the realization you have gained through the kindness of your guru into the forest or thicket of conceptualization.
다 담보가란서 라마잘 대단했던 담보 담제슈데 송 라미게 명함은 남 되는 데서 냠len제 된 냠len제 발았더니 랑라 된 담보 냠 손나다면다 용 되는 데림지림지 된 또발아 주네 주로네 템보 용교래 가란서 셈라.
First, we meet a guru, and under the guidance and in the presence of that guru, we take various vows, we undertake samaya. Then we receive instruction, practical instruction, and we practice them. And through practicing, we start to experience various things. And eventually, these transitory experiences dissipate, and in their stead, we give rise to a stable realization of the true meaning.
다치 라메기 나샤베 담아 다소서 양도 도바 제버데 균종네 양네 양도 곰네 되는 주요대 공부를 다해디 계천부를라 간동기 줄에 나래 곰 나래 참 연접이 나래 다 남균기 다치 양네 가나가나 대마제버제네 민 연다 또 마담 이체도라 되네 미 상승라도 다 창승스나래 상가승이 나와 되네 지 가서래 내가 다 medece 냠내 만나 봐잖아 되네 냠도 상만 라도래 냠도 상만 예도래 나만 랑나 귤에 계셔보대 매버차도 그래.
What we need to do at any stage of this process is to continue to nourish our experience, to continue to foster realization through practice. And as long as we continue, it will continue to develop. The problem that Lord Gampopa is pointing out here is that sometimes people get diverted. They get diverted by the hope for some kind of name or position, some kind of profit or security. Whatever it is, we develop some kind of idea of something better. We become busy and we discard our practice. And that is a tragic waste.
다 남행기 원도 쇼송 된 냠도데서 종조 마중 라송나 방보레스 다 랑라 누르시 예요레데 누르데 랑이 다보 자마도 바다 다 누르데 술라테네 녀버스나 라미기 담갈라테네 녀버레 라미기 같은라테네 녀버레데 맹할테네 이나얀데 가랑 다보 자마도 종마도다 tor송나 방보레스.
So again, it's like somebody gave you a jewel. Your guru kindly handed you a jewel. All you need to do is take proper care of it. But you didn't do that. You lost it somewhere in a thicket. And that would be a tragedy.
다 제버데 조톱 남제 명아 사몬데 메나 깔멘 남로 송도 송도 방스.
The eighth one is, it is a tragedy to sell to the unreceptive the profound instructions of the siddhas.
다 조톱스 되어가라 저당 다 죽어도 장내 말을 교내 자가 파베유리다 벽강전지 좀 인술라 다 개바 So,
siddhas here refers to the siddhas of our lineage, those in the lineage from Vajradhara down to the present, who, even in this brief human life, have demonstrated the achievement of awakening in their one lifetime. Such as Tilopa and Naropa of India, and Marpa, Milarepa, and Gampopa of Tibet, and so forth. Did these people become siddhas by accident? No. They became siddhas under very specific causes and conditions. They received instructions from their respective gurus, and they faithfully practiced these instructions, putting up with whatever difficulty, whatever hardship the practice of those instructions entailed. And finally, they mastered those instructions to such an extent that they not only mastered the instructions, but they mastered their mind, and therefore they mastered reality. And when we call someone a siddha, what we really mean is that they have gained control over reality. So, these siddhas became siddhas through practicing certain instructions. And these are the same instructions that we receive nowadays from their successors. These instructions start with how to undertake and maintain various vows and samaya, how to meditate on deities, how to imagine them, how to engage in the practices of tranquility and insight, and so forth. These instructions should be used by us for our own development in order to achieve the fruition they're designed to lead to. And in cases where somebody else is going to use them, of course it is excellent to provide them with those instructions, because by using them, their lives too will become fruitful.
단들라 미나 갈메 남라 송도 송도 방 신치도 요래 미나스도 전냠수 멜랭겐 전체 전냠수 렘비 칼바당 미댕겐 전체 대바 먹으면겐.
When it says here it's tragic to sell them to those who are unreceptive or without the good fortune to practice them, it means it's a waste of these instructions if they become articles for sale in some kind of spiritual market, where they are given not to those who will use them, but sold to the highest bidder, sold to people who don't really even have faith in them and are therefore not qualified to practice them because they won't.
다 건줄라 churchbe kalba megen namji 건조 되네 근데 주셔서라 용 양나 남만살라 용 가리시기도 간데치기도 다 다제당 계제지 되네 지도가 남만디게 삼나 오메 콜레 주셔나 공할 부르데 부자래 물톱자래 삼네드네 나 담아서 던샤바나 되네 대 총레스 되네 제뉴 말레스 종야야 말레 되네 종소나 방보레스 되네 딜라 맹마다 담아기 두시면은 전라 어버송 접잡사도 요레스.
Now, how does this happen? Sometimes people will come to hear the teachings of a guru, not because they have faith in that guru or because they really wish to practice what that guru is teaching, but for the sake of some kind of entertainment or diversion, or just out of curiosity. They just want to see, I wonder what so-and-so says when he or she is teaching. I want to see what they're like. And then if the guru then thinks, well, I know these people aren't really interested, but nevertheless, they look wealthy. So if I give them these teachings, they'll surely give me extensive offerings, and gives the teachings to them, the guru is at fault. Because he or she is no longer thinking of the instructions as useful, practical instructions for the achievement of awakening. He or she is thinking of those instructions as an article or a possession that he can sell for his own personal benefit. So the point here is, don't sell Dharma. There are two fit uses for the profound instructions of the siddhas of our lineage. One is to use them yourself through practice to achieve awakening. The other is to offer them to those who will also use them and will also benefit from them. And those two uses are fine and appropriate, but don't use them to make money. The ninth of the 10 in this first list is, it is tragic to abandon our parents, our kind parents, all beings, through hatred. In order to pursue the path we are on, we need to cultivate bodhicitta. And the object of that cultivation must be all beings, all of whom have been our parents. We therefore need to focus our bodhicitta on all of them.
Samashaka, Sadanga, Tomashaba, Tondala, Sajute, Tonjute, Junjute, Lobjong Tang, that Lobjala Tang, Lobjong Jeju, Medam Anyaba, Yambache, Nepam Pamagita, Buddha Nayon Sunday, Sunjoje, the Nechi, Shangi, Nebajan Sunday, Sunjoje, then Tamji, Buddha, Pemba Bashi to Bure, the Nepemba to be Jinjin Pamande, then Tata Mama Nashin, to us nation, but the Zula, then Negab Kuranto Layang, Karioresna, Maribe Wangi, Marangi, Pugu in some Moshego Mare, Manala Mariba Wangi, and there's a Pama in one much of a gene, and Pass Nobate, Yomares, there's some Pama in Gongores, Sambasam Pajagore, Shigore.
Why do we need to be so benevolent toward all beings? Because they have all been our parents. Throughout beginningless time, we have undertaken so many births that each and every being has time and time again been our parent. When each being was our parent, they were very kind to us. When we were so young that we didn't know how to feed ourselves, they fed us. They taught us how to eat, how to drink. They provided our food. They provided our clothing. They sent us to school. They protected us from harm, and so on. They don't recognize us as their children because they are afflicted by ignorance. We don't recognize them as our parents because we are afflicted by ignorance too. Although we don't recognize them as our parents, we learn that they were through the instructions of our Guru. And if you understand that all beings have been your parents, then you understand that you have the duty to repay their kindness. In short, in any situation where you can help another person, it is tragic not to do so. If you are around the ill, you can help them. If you are an experienced practitioner around new practitioners, you can help them, you can guide them. There's always something you can do to help another person. And since everyone has been your parent, everyone really deserves your help. So to refuse your help when you can give it to another is tragic. Then the last of the 10 in this first list is, it is tragic to leave one's youthful 3 gates. It's a little bit late for that tragedy for me. It's tragic to leave. Is there anyone here to whom this still applies? There's a couple of them. It's tragic to leave those youthful 3 gates, body, speech, and mind, in ordinary neutrality.
산이 긴고래 되다 저주고 삼다 데려다 기자지 시교래 근데 다는 저주고래 저주비 값소양 랑게 삼나 당가 순순비 값소라 지근지 자와망보 제제 드네 산이 긴고 자들 드네 제제된 자와 제용조 제다 제면에 그냥 탑투 근데 다 쳐지 좀나 삼네 너로레스.
What Gampopa is talking about here is our life plans. or the life plans we might have had at some point in the, dare I say, distant past. Oftentimes, when people are fairly young, they think, well, now I'm young, so I should have fun. I'll practice when I'm old and I can't have so much fun anymore. Now I'm young, I should engage in worldly things. I can practice when I'm old and wizened. But that's taking your life by the wrong end of the stick. So basically, to understand what Gampopa is talking about here, you may need to understand the cultural context. In Asia, basically the attitude is, if you're not really that intent about practicing Dharma, you leave it until a point where you're so feeble anyway that you can't do anything else. And so it's the activity of last resort. The idea is when you get to be about 60 or 70, you're physically so feeble and mentally so feeble that no one's going to listen to you. You can't really do much that's important, so you might as well just practice Dharma then. So the attitude that he's criticizing is one where Dharma becomes the lowest priority in your life, becomes something that you'll do when you're too feeble to do anything else. What Gampopa is saying here is that attitude is completely incorrect. The faculties, the strong faculties that you have in your youth are needed for Dharma. When you're young, your body is strong, your speech is powerful, and your mind is clear. You should use that youthful vigor to perform prostrations and circumambulation and serve the Dharma. You should use that powerful youthful speech to recite mantras and liturgies, and use that youthful clarity of mind to meditate. When you're young, you can learn anything and do just about anything you set your mind to. Once you're old, it's much harder to learn things. And it's much harder to do things because both your mind and your body and even your speech are, compared to in your youth, quite feeble and weak. So what Gampopa is telling us is use your youthful body, speech, and mind properly. Employ them in the service and practice of Dharma. Don't let them go to waste through indolence.
다 약보실로 땅고레스 배저 약보실로 땅토바 제고레스 네 돌아서나 배방보레스 양제인데 더비에 갈라카보레 저거죠.
So basically what this first list of 10 things, called 10 tragedies, consists of is 10 precious things that we have that are tragic to waste. And by enumerating them, Gampopa is advising us not to allow them to go to waste, saying it will be a pity, it will be a tragedy if you do so.
다 니버데 네버도 코와 네버도 고그레스 인지민지 고그레스 다 그베주죠.
Then his second list are 10 things that we definitely need.
다 당보데 랑기 푸주스미 되지시자 맞춰보시고스.
푸즈 짐베스나
푸주스나 땡가랑기 제톱사레스네 다데 랑랑 이제 여보시고 그거다.
그래. 시자마 쪽버스나 랑게
시자
포게 덤마 쪽바 세키.
단단데 잡으실래 다 시자스 되가 내가 그러나 차시든 맞춰보자 버렸어 시자생.
So the first of the 10 necessary things is it is necessary to accurately assess your own capabilities and therefore not mistake the plans you make or not mistake your intentions.
다치단게 랑기 최대 랑기 생고거래 보조세도가라 난 마랑기 로저당 홍보당 뜨네 내가 더 제거를 만나지기 난 마랑 접으시 딱 개겐지 남나 난 알아 개겐기 롭좀 가야면나 개겐전 하바셔야 되나 소여 말해 근데 발라선 제대로 말해.
We have to be realistic in assessing our own talents, abilities, intelligence, and training. If we're unrealistic, then we won't get anywhere. For example, if I all of a sudden said, I'm going to be a school teacher, and tried to serve as a school teacher, well, I don't have the training of a school teacher. I don't know how to do the job of a school teacher. It would be a meaningless boast if I just said, I'm a school teacher.
다든데 랑기 포즈 심바스는 랑기 다 간데제 제고나양 다다제 투기레 상에 딩조당 때문에 보고요래 이제 투기레 상에.
So when you make plans or decide to do something, you need to first assess your ability to do it so that when you proceed with the plan or the planned endeavor, you can do so with the confidence, I can do this.
시사 초과선 당부 차시라고 저다 다른 가장 간반이라고 다 저기 야천복이 차시잖아. 당부한 게 등조지요래 보조지요래 된 총디다 마음박이 차시 야보진데 이나야랑 지구기 멤버 양 총디촌이다 저시대 야보 등이 많아 근데 시사야고 시사적 추소나 마음발에 내가 상만 놓주시고 좀 자도고요래 근데 시사 맞추고 저고요래.
And then when you actually try to do what it is you've decided to do, you need to do it carefully so that it rests on a firm footing. For example, if you develop a big plan to start a large company, that involves working with many, many others. You can't do it alone. So therefore, you need to consult those others, plan, work with them, and create the groundwork for it in a healthy way. And then if you start out on the right foot, then it will grow healthily. But if you start out with a flawed plan or a flawed groundwork, the whole thing will be skewed from the beginning.
다치 차시 만노바샤 차시데 노소나 산이 내가 가야 된다 저도 말에 된되된 당번에 삼려야고 땅에 내가 제대 계신보래.
So you need to think carefully before you begin any significant endeavor. Assess your ability to do it and make realistic and practical plans. Because if your plans are mistaken, then the endeavor will not succeed.
다디나신게 다 추기 돌아잖아요. 동바 담제돼서 담보 마시고네 랑이라 samla yapo daje dane ta domba damche song tupsare ma tupsa mare dine song tupsa yena domba damche tiso shu sabe chala ta yapo song tuba yena dine dagi kondo nancheng den tabines jotuba da yongyo re dine song dambo ne daje gaya madan dine kanjong manjong jejana den jimayang jebudia den nojoyo re.
So, to apply this to Dharma, it means before you undertake any vows or take any samayas, that you first assess your ability to keep them. You think, if I take this vow, will I be able to keep it? If I take this samaya, will I be able to keep it? And so on. And only once you are confident that you can keep the vow or samaya, should you go ahead and take it. The second necessary thing is, it is necessary to accomplish the instructions or commands of a holy guru with faith and diligence. What is being said here is to actually implement your guru's instructions or commands requires faith and diligence or exertion. And when you receive these instructions, you need to actually practice them with faith and exertion. Implied in this statement that this requires faith and exertion is that it is difficult to implement one's guru's instructions. If it weren't difficult, it wouldn't require faith and exertion. Basically, the instructions that we receive come down to things like, do such and such good things, stop doing such and such bad things, and so on. Because this is initially unnatural to us, it is difficult. It requires both a leap of faith and exertion. As Shantideva writes in the Bodhicharyavatara, all qualities come from diligence. Without diligence, you can't accomplish anything. Given that this was written by Lord Gampopa and therefore comes from the early Kajupas, we should also place this in the context of Milarepa's express obedience and devotion to Marpa and Naropa's to Tilopa. Whatever bizarre thing Tilopa told Naropa to do, he did it willingly, with faith and devotion and diligence. And no matter what Marpa asked of Milarepa, he did it. And this is the type of implementation of the Guru's commands that actually produces realization, as it did in their case. Dila damga ke chun shepe dila gangza ke saniku. Ama ma gangza re damga la norio marwa. Damga sama sanche ke sonre gangza re do. Adela pe me din no dopore. Yeah. This Anila. Our text has some very significant printing errors. This next one, the Rinpoche's text says, understand the qualities or the difference in qualities of individuals, not instructions. All the instructions are good, but yeah. So the next one is, I better look, I want to see what it says. Ganzake, Chönyin Shebe, Lame, Damka. Dila Damga said, let me see, Lame Damka. I wonder how that happened. Manorwa Shikos. Yeah, his makes much more sense. Understanding the variations in quality of different individuals, don't choose the wrong guru. It is necessary not to choose the wrong guru. What's her name? The one that you have, that one that Laura and I did, does that have the Tibetan in it?
Yes.
Can I see it? Sorry to be so troublesome. But the meaning of the two is very different, and what Rinpoche has makes a lot more sense. He's Damga Manorwa. Damga Manorwa. But there's somebody though.
There's somebody.
Oh, that's better. Danga ke Chönyin Shebe, Lame Danga. Danga Yimbare. It looks like maybe our text is Danga ke Chönyin Shebe sana.
Lamagi ma kan sam lomala lama da loma nyam do ron lamagi sam la geja sam bo den je chödang den ba kamyonang sam la chö mai mi kamyonang da loma de sharab ya boyona o di lamegi chö chola song sam dama im ba she o di dama mare kyönde sam hago yes.
Oh, well, the way Rinpoche is explaining it based on this text and this one, here you can, is very different. It says it actually is instruction, and it says, by understanding the difference between instruction and other conversation, do not mistake the implementation of your guru's instructions. So it's not about the choice of a guru. Rinpoche said what this means is that, like, when a guru is teaching or talking, sometimes they will be actually teaching you and providing instruction, and those things you need to take to heart. And sometimes they're not. And you must know of the things they say when they are teaching and when they are, it doesn't say like joking around, but when they are not.
Tachidangi lama ki cham samla chikdengi jawa kola song cham samla chö kola song da lama nyam de kyuning bo nyam de jote ba na
No, sir.
tene de tene lama ki tene shene song ba de tene kyungi chokadire yunengi chokari ba de narang hago res.
This is speaking of when, for example, you are in attendance of a guru for a long time, and therefore at times they will need to be discussing mundane matters, mundane practicalities. And therefore you need to know when they are talking about Dharma and giving you advice that you need to follow, and when they are just talking about mundane matters, and you should not take it as instruction.
경기 좋다. 지난번에 참sam랑 나랑라 겸망 보여나양. 근데 솔라 내가 보고싶을 때 남에게 참sam라 최당 모든 게 갈업 남기로 가다. 근데 딜라 때는 나랑라 오 딜라명을 담아래자 나랑라 견디 열에 땅아 삽삽 제거도 섬네. 그냥 담아대 남기로 와.
Also, sometimes your guru will speak in a way that is in perfect accordance with the Dharma. And when they do so, you should take those instructions literally and apply them as best you can. Other times, if your guru speaks in a mundane way, seems to be gossiping or talking about mundane or irrelevant matters, you can take that as an indication that your mind must be involved in those things. And as an instruction, wow, if he or she is talking about these things, I must be so involved in this kind of stuff myself. So you can take that as a warning sign that your mind is dwelling on those matters as well.
다 시바데 셔랍당 대바 낸덴지 람마 담비 토공 렘바시 그 세도
The fourth one is, it is necessary to, with intelligence, faith, and earnest endeavor, attempt to realize your guru's intention or your guru's wisdom.
당가랑솔라 로말라야 인덴나바 숨상고레스 담보 내룩셰베 셔랍 나 셔랍 장바키야 메변 대강라 대바고레스.
First of all, disciples need three qualities. The first is the intelligence to realize, the insight to realize the nature of things. But that insight is not enough. In addition to that, you need faith.
다 셔랍단 대바니 여장 안데가나 낸덴지 준비되고레스 대숨 좀네 안에 라마야보시데나 나 람메기 토라가 여바데 나가랑 냠는 제도고레스.
And those two themselves are not enough. You also need diligence. If you have these three things, this kind of wisdom or insight, intelligence, faith, and diligence, then you can realize your guru's wisdom.
다데인데 제 드네 라마라 계준 상승이 유는 가야나양 랑라 셔랍 대바 준비스미나 드네데 잠제 랑교라.
Basically, regardless of how vast your guru's qualities are, no matter how learned, how noble, and how kind he is, if you have faith, intelligence, and diligence, you can emulate your guru and achieve the same qualities. Well, we're out of time, so we have to stop here for this afternoon. So, although we're out of time, I will take one or two questions. If you have any, if you don't have any, then we'll just dedicate the virtue. Yes.
I was wondering, Rinpoche, what the samaya was for last night's empowerment.
다지단게 라트브기 냠린데서 제고도 라트브 갑스다 다제 감보파 감보파게 되는지 라트브 다뚜뚜인데 요래 된데 제tum나 야보래 제마tum나 엄마 홍사나에 되기도.
So, I mean, ideally, to practice the Gampopa Guru Sadhana, when you take those Guru Sadhana empowerments, the purpose is so that you can do those Guru Sadhanas. And there is a concise version of it. But otherwise, you can recite the mantra Om Ahum.
And I have one other question. If you have done what you spoke of earlier, where you have a guru and then you lose faith in that guru, and then your faith comes back, how can you make that up?
Jambo lama ten, dene lama la depa tes lo, dene yangsha depa chetona, dene batak de la depa lo pake, de dep drama la karego.
Tandisala ikyasa dene. The
Vajrasattva mantra practice, and also confess your lapse of faith to your guru.
Rinpoche, I thought I heard you say that even if you have a yidyam and practice a yidyam,
What?
even if you practice a yidyam but you don't complete the nundro,
Oh, yidam. Okay.
did I pronounce it wrong?
He said yidyam.
And you practice the yiddam. You practice the yiddam, but you don't complete the nudro. That the practice of the yiddam would be ineffectual. So what if the yiddam was given to you by your guru, and that does interfere with your time practicing the nundro,
Yeah.
or compete with,
Right.
a better way of saying it.
Tata ngondro matsage bata yedam je gomde drub nayang shed ngondro toge mareso. Te yendo tene range tsavela make rangla ngondro yang po ngondro sa song. Tene te nyamda yang yedam gomde po yedam te gomde ja sona. Nika te tets te yedam ge gomde te ngondro sa pa ge dutsala tets budget rona kareso.
간사 이담 검역이 되서대
Te ngondro sa ge dutsutang tets gender ro so bido.
다자당기 다르서 라마데기 이담 검라 되가라 나로마데 되서당 뜬데나 근데스 이담 나절 라메 규데서 바제 시라 검 숨겨 좀 말해 삼도
La.
나절 라메 규데서
La so.
다자주 데서 제레세 신드마 데네다고 다자당 담멜라 요다 요르데 오늘 지난다 이제 고마토 냠네 제발라 코로나 센텐 제바나 원전 재미 좀 뭐로 도고요래 먼저 만들었나 데네지 마랑라 딕바다 제바데서 총도 다도고요 말에.
Well, usually the yidams that are given to people who have not yet completed ngondro are practices of the lower tantras, such as Chenrezig or a form of Tara or the medicine Buddha and so on, which are, however they're presented, are basically Kriya Tantra or Charya Tantra practices, where you definitely need to have done ngondro first is in pursuing any of the Anuttara Yoga Tantra Yidam practices.
The higher yogas.
Yes.
Okay. One last question about practice. Is there any, if you have a period where you finished 2 or 3 sections of the nundro, and then there's a year or two separation between the 3rd or 4th section, can you continue with the 3rd and 4th section even though it's been a year or two when you did the first 2 sections, like prostrations and
Ko chagda yija zaware. Tene manda ke sabe kaso tene batak te chenge wonge ko batak te luso mares. Da mutune manda sa lamenoto tapuna regedes.
되게 다 삼삼라 갱기 왕기 루감마데 바당 되네지 레가게 왕기 되나 바제인데 용기여데 영나야 되네지 남마데 사서 되네 대제마데 뭐든지 제나 야보여래 되게 나랑 이담 요거들라 아니 두두시나 삼스타나 나랑 저 뒤버티바 당이 빼디 배나 롱바지기 개보다고 프레지던트하고지 산내직라 다 되네 주거나 코 마용공라 먼저 장마인 점이 제거래 사자 장마적으로 다적약보 제거래 다적 맞으나 거 용어 말해 거기 담고 바제 거기 버티 가서 당거래 디나신기 아란스킬라 이 담기 무릎에서 터버 제발라 아란스 교틱 영화에서 장마야 보고요.
That's fine. Things get in the way. You know, ill health, excessive work responsibilities, family situations, things get in the way. And then you simply pick up as soon as you can and continue. So you continue from wherever you left off and go on. That's not a problem. But I want, Rinpoche said, to return to the question of yidams and the reason why purification must precede the practice of any of the major Anuttara Yoga yidams. And this is because, imagine it's a little bit like this. If you were to invite the President of the United States somewhere, there would be a great deal of preparation. Certainly the place, the auditorium, or whatever it was, you would spruce it up. You'd clean it, you'd make sure everything was in good repair, and that it was a pleasant and appropriate environment to which to invite the president to speak or whatever. It's like that. Before inviting these deities into your being, you purify your being so that through your contact with them, you can receive their blessing and gain siddhi.
Is this referring mostly to the Vajrasattva or to the mandala or not specifying?
다지단기 대상만 되어요. 지금질라. 다 담보 가란조 되네지. 남바상집에 되고 줘라. 잠도 되네 남바상에 상집에 자갑나 레서를라야 되고 첨보를 줘라. 심게 되네 대지랑 가란조처럼 배침망보 송고 디바티바망보요래. 강화모된 디트다에치돌라. 되네 제 도시sem바데 레라보 전자지 당이 동샤도에 요래 되네 가란조 내 거래 요래 차서 가르치나 디바다에게 다 망보요래 전주바폴 되네 작바제 망보제 요래 되나야 도시sem바데 레라보 되네 지 안다 되네 디트 다일라 뉴바침보 이데 도시sem바 소샤요래 디나나 잔데 가란조라 되네 지 세당선남 페나레 될때 멘탈 된지미 푸고고요래 되네 멘탈 마부나 디바티바 다바 장바기 양산적으로 도도고요 말에.
Well, they're all interconnected. The Ngondo practice is a little bit like the stages of emigrating to a new country. And taking refuge is a little bit like becoming a citizen of the country of Buddhism. And then you generate bodhicitta because within Buddhism you want to become a Mahayana citizen. And then the Vajrasattva practice is a little bit like learning to keep the laws of your new country. Now, the Vajrasattva practice is given in the preliminaries because it is the easiest way to purify obscurations. There are loads of other ways to purify obscurations, such as reciting the 35 Buddhas, circumambulation, making offerings, performing prostrations, all these things purify obscurations. And especially prostrations can be very powerful for physical purification. But the Vajrasattva practice is a very efficient way of purifying yourself of obscurations. And then that is not enough. In order to achieve Buddhahood, you also need to accumulate merit. So therefore you offer the mandala and so forth. And in order to realize Mahamudra, you definitely need the practice of Guru Yoga.
Thank you for your answers. You relieved a lot of my concerns. Thank you.
One
more, last one.
Then tomorrow we will say.
Thank you, Rinpoche, for these teachings. Many of us in the West didn't have the karma to come into contact with Dharma when we were young, and only came into contact with it when we're old and feeble. Do you have any advice for us?
Natsuya minsane geko kapso porto morto kapso mato chujayo maris.
다지당 다 최단에 로자타모 무시라 도쿄 말에 디네디인디 background 최시라요 말에 디인디 총총이 요한테 스칼라가 보래 다 에지아다 보다나 디네지 가져고랑 남바인디 디네지 예용되니 최단 대화에도 중중에다 넘버 더 차도별에 이나 드린 가장 하나도 관라도도 로니 수전인데 안에서 근데 제 제도가라 중중에 도와서네 제가도 단 마음발로 많은 도시게
라 콘소게
로 중중한다 남발로 주도와서네 안에서도 가서
well, you know, this is a cultural difference, and because Buddhism has not been in this country for very long, as you say, most Western Buddhists are those who have converted at a certain age. And so in an Asian context, of course, it is different. You grow up with a Buddhist background, you're exposed to Buddhism from birth. But it is changing. I noticed that some of the anis going into the 3-year retreat here are very young. So it is changing.
다시단기 들어가상 라마만 보페 되네 제 졸라강 되나 된바데 시차용도 콜레 되네 총존에 좋아지게라 아니 밤마도 보글로 좋아지에서거는 잠잠라 되네 대가서 보글로 우주마 잡아지네 라강한 제주 잠잠지 따고지 지네 코로나 신기 되네 릭세용도 아마 줘들려나 되네 줘들랑신 가와단 좋아되네 내용을.
But now the situation is changing because so many eminent masters have come to this country and they have built beautiful temples such as this one. People are being more exposed to it. And so there is a new generation of children who are growing up with exposure to it. And, parents shouldn't attempt to force their children to come to Buddhist events, but they can always expose their children, let them see these things, and so that they're aware of them, so that it's part of their world, and then it will be easier if they have a predisposition to Buddhist practice. It will be easier for it to awaken for them before they are of a certain age. For example, recently with the Dalai Lama's teachings, there were lots of young people.
Okay, but what about us?
Consola penguin, not so? Yes. We just need to practice as best as we can.
Thank you very much.
Please dedicate the virtue to all beings throughout space. Sebe